This screencast is intended to provide you with the social historical background of the Middle Ages, and in particular the thematic focus of the literature from that period. So the hope here is that you see some parallels between what you're studying in world history as well as a harkening back to what you guys did in ninth grade. So as we move from our brief survey of the Greco-Roman period, namely our study of the Iliad and the Aeneid, the next major historical period in Western civilization is that of the Middle Ages. So why is it called the Middle Ages? Well, it's simply the period of time between antiquity, again this is the Greeks and the Romans, and what we consider the modern era. So that is to say, it is the time between the fall of the Roman Empire and the 15th century, or the beginning of the Italian Renaissance. So again, if you recall from ninth grade or world history, the word Renaissance means rebirth or reawakening. The rebirth that the name is referring to is the rebirth or reawakening of the Greco-Roman ideas and ideals from that particular time period. So a lot of students remember, oh yeah, the Renaissance means rebirth, but rebirth of what? So it's the Greek and Roman ideas. So during the Renaissance, the artists, politicians, leaders, and society in general mimicked the culture from antiquity. So it's the time where culture was lost is considered the Middle Ages because it's between those two prolific and influential eras. So what I have here are two busts. The one on the left is from Greece, the one on the right is from the Renaissance. So notice the similarities in each of them. So again, it's just the same culture, Greco-Roman culture was revived during the Renaissance, and the time between that is the Middle Ages. Shifts in social and religious structures obviously led to the shifts in literature and storytelling. So a little bit of background as far as Rome is concerned, the shift here. So Rome's power at the emergence of the Middle Ages was fading. Obviously, the internal structure was divided. It was becoming more corrupt. It became the thing that Pericles was fearing and Socrates was fearing as well. And also was economically weak, and this was due in large part to the expansion of empire. So Rome at the time was fighting with Germanic tribes to the north. They were fighting with other tribes to the east as well. They had outposts all the way out to parts of Asia. They were even down into northern Africa. So as I mentioned, centralized power was weak because their empire was so spread out. During this time, the loss of government, loss of politics, loss of culture happened, and feudalism emerged. So because of the fractured form of government, fiefdoms and kingdoms popped up all over the place with different lords and kings being in charge of different areas. So during this time, there was a huge move from the myths and gods of Rome to that of Christianity, and a lot of the kings and lords latched onto this idea because it also allowed them a way to use story to gain power, similar to what other emperors and rulers had done in the past. So Emperor Constantine was actually the first one to use this, a form of storytelling, to influence people, and the kings and the lords took it from him. So it's a shift from paganism, or the worship of nature and many gods, polytheism, to that of Christianity and monotheism. A couple other things that I'll note here is that the Muslims or Moors threaten Europe, and so Charles the Great, or Charlemagne, vowed to defeat them, and this is where the whole idea of the Crusades came into play. So Europe, to some degree, was united against the barbarians to the north and the invading threat from the south, which was the Moors. And to justify some of their claims and also to get money and wealth and supplies, they would go down to Jordan and Israel, and in the name of, I guess, early manifest destiny, they would go and ransack the place and try to reclaim the Holy Land, which is a war that's still going on today in the West Bank. And so the literature in particular heavily reflects this movement to Christianity. And you guys will learn a little bit more about this in 12th grade, but there's the Code of Chivalry. And here we have a couple things. It comes from the French word cheval. And these were knights emerged, and they were expected to be great horsemen, and they had a superhero status akin to that of the early heroes like Hercules, Achilles, Hector, Aeneas, so on and so forth. So there's a code that they all lived by, and there were four things. One is loyalty to his lord, so you would always try and support your king no matter what. Defending the weak, especially women. This is where we get our damsel in distress, and a lot of the Disney princesses follow this archetype. You'd also have to dedicate your service to the glory of God. Similar to how Aeneas was very pious, any knight would do the same thing. So if you were a young child or anyone in society that read about these stories, you'd ascribe to these ideals. Lastly is the idea of courtly love, so that you would pledge your love to a woman, but you do not cross the line sexually. So you could do anything. You could write that person poems, you could vow to fight for that woman, but you'd never cross the line. And essentially, that woman could be married, and the knight could be married as well. Now, these particular codes come into play when we read about the story of Paolo and Francesca in Inferno.